You know that feeling?
Yeah.
When you're trying to keep your digital world safe, and it just feels like you're always one step behind.
Yeah, absolutely. New threats pop up constantly.
And then there's this whole quantum computing thing looming.
Yeah.
How do you even start building systems that can actually stand up to all that?
Well, it's a huge challenge, but that's exactly what we're digging into today. We've got some really interesting sources here.
Okay, let's unpack this, because for this deep dive, we've got some fascinating material that really tries to tackle this.
That's right. We've been looking through MICT Core Concepts, Reload v3, OMZTA, HCTS, ZT v1.0, also this piece called OMZTA Unhackable.
Right.
Which definitely caught my eye, and the proposed OMZTA license v2.0.
A great collection.
Yeah, for anyone really grappling with, modern digital security and how to do it right, this stuff offers a pretty compelling way forward.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And this deep dive is really focused for you, the listener, especially if you want to get a good, solid handle on complex stuff pretty quickly, but, properly. Our mission today, demystify OMZTA. That's Open MICT Zero Trust Architecture. We want to give you a clear sense of what it is, how it actually works, and why it might be a really big deal for security without drowning you in tech speak.
And hopefully hit some of those aha moments along the way.
Exactly, those satisfying clicks when it all makes sense.
So before we jump right into OMZTA itself, we probably need to talk about where it comes from, its roots.
Good point.
It all builds on something called the MICT framework. MICT stands for Mobius-Inspired Cyclical Transformation.
Mobius-inspired.
Okay. Yeah. Developed by the Board Brains Consortium. That's John Reagan working with the AI Gemini.
A Mobius strip. And now you've got my attention. I remember those from school. Sort of.
Yeah.
The loop with only one side. How does that connect to, advanced security?
It's more conceptual, right? Think about the properties of a Mobius strip. It's continuous. It doesn't really have a distinct inside or outside, just one surface, one boundary. That's used as an analogy for how MICT looks at security. It's about ongoing interconnected processes. Trust isn't just, granted once. It's constantly being checked and transformed.
Interesting analogy. So continuous, evolving. How does that translate into, a practical fix for today's security problems and tomorrow's?
Yeah.
Is that where OMZTA fits in?
Precisely. OMZTA takes those MICT ideas and builds a whole security framework on top, specifically designed to get around the problems with older security models, especially in these really spread out, complicated systems we have now.
Right, like cloud environments, IoT.
Exactly. And crucially, it's designed looking ahead, thinking about future threats, especially quantum computing potentially breaking current encryption.
Quantum-ready security. Yeah. Okay, that sounds big. What makes OMZTA supposedly ready for that? How does it tackle that specific threat?
Well, a huge part of it is how it blends zero trust principles with something they call crypto agility.
Crypto agility, okay.
So, zero trust, you probably know the basics. Assume you might already be breached, so verify everything explicitly every time. Give the absolute minimum access needed.
Least privilege, yeah.
Right. OMZTA lives and breathes that. Constant checks, dynamic changes based on context, and the crypto agility part means it's built from the ground up to adapt its cryptography. So when we need post-quantum crypto, it's designed to switch over.
Okay, let's dig into that zero trust part within OMZTA a bit more. We hear the term all the time, but what does it actually do here?
So inside OMZTA, it's fundamental. The baseline assumption is nothing is trusted by default. Not the user, not the device, not the network path.
Nothing.
Every single request to access something gets checked rigorously, using all the context data it can get. And that least privilege idea, it's strict. You only get the exact permissions you need for that specific task, for that specific time.
Very granular.
Very. And microsegmentation is built in. If something does get compromised, it's contained, isolated, it can't easily spread. Plus, everything is logged, monitored continuously. You have that audit trail, that visibility.
So it's like a system that's always suspicious, always checking, which, it kind of makes sense these days.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the MICT cycle drives this continuous verification. Can you break down those stages for us? MICT.
Absolutely. Think of the MICT cycle as the engine, right?
Right.
Running constantly, keeping the security posture updated. 4 stages in a loop. First is mapping.
Mapping, okay.
This is where the system just gathers all the relevant info in real time. Who's asking? What device are they using? What resource do they want? What's the network look like? What are the current threats out there? It builds a complete picture. What's happening right now?
So total situational awareness first.
Got it.
What's next once it has that picture?
Then comes iteration. Based on everything gathered in mapping, the system starts processing the request. Does an initial check against the basic security policies, kind of a first pass? Does this look generally okay based on the rules?
Okay, context gathered, initial check done. How does it then really make sure the request is legit and safe?
That's the critical part. Checking. C. This is the deep verification. Is the user identity really confirmed? Is the device healthy, configured correctly? Is it complying with all relevant policies? Are there any weird anomalies? This is where never trust, always verify really happens.
Okay, the core check. So what if it finds something wrong during that check? What happens then?
That flows right into the last stage, transformation. T. This is decision time. Allow the access, deny it, maybe limit it somehow, based purely on the check results.
Makes the call.
Right, and then it acts. Enforces the decision, opens the connection, blocks it, maybe flags the device. But crucially, it also updates things. Trust scores for the user or device might change. Everything gets logged in detail. And this is key for adaptability. It might even tweak the system state or adjust a policy based on what it learned from the check.
So it learns and adapts on the fly.
Exactly. It reacts, learns, evolves. How do we respond? What did we learn? How do we get better? And then the results of that transformation feed right back into mapping for the next request or the next cycle. It's a continuous loop.
Map, iterate, check, transform, and repeat.
Yeah.
That does sound really proactive, but running that constantly across a big messy IT setup seems like it would be incredibly complex to manage.
It definitely could be. And that's why OMZTA uses this thing called HCTS-ZT, Hierarchical Contextual Transformation System, tailored for zero trust.
HCTS-ZT. Okay, another acronym.
Yeah, sorry. But the idea is pretty straightforward. It's a layered approach. Instead of one giant MICT cycle trying to do everything, you have specialized MICT cycles running at different levels of the system, like defense in depth.
Okay. Layers of these MICT cycles, each doing its own job. Tell me about these layers.
Think of 4 main layers. Down at the bottom, L1, the data plane. This is super fast, basic stuff. Checking network packets, simple allow deny rules right at the edge. Your first line.
Got it. Network level.
Then L2, endpoint and identity. This layer digs deeper into the device itself. Is it healthy, patched, compliant? And it handles the heavy lifting for user authentication, making sure the user is really who they claim to be.
Device health and user identity.
Okay.
Up from there.
L3, access control and policy. This is like the central brain for access decisions. It pulls together all the context from L1 and L2, looks at the defined policies, and makes those fine-grained decisions about who gets access to what. It's a dynamic policy decision point.
Where the main access logic lives.
Yeah.
And the top layer.
L4, strategy and orchestration. This gives you the big picture view. It monitors the overall security posture, coordinates responses to major threats or incidents, and handles strategic shifts like rolling out new security policies across the whole system.
Okay, so each layer has its own MICT cycle focused on its specific job, all working together. That sounds much more manageable, scalable. Now let's circle back to that crypto agility you mentioned. How does that fit into these layers in the MICT cycle? It sounds critical for the future-proofing part.
It really is a key differentiator. Preparing for post-quantum crypto, PQC, is tough because it might mean ripping out and replacing algorithms everywhere.
A huge job.
Huge. OMZTA tries to build that capability in. So during the checking C stage in relevant MICT cycles, say, one handling logins or setting up a secure channel, the system looks at the crypto protocols being used. It checks them against the current policy. Does the policy demand quantum resistance now? Is this algorithm considered weak?
The policy dictates the crypto requirements.
Exactly. And then, in the transformation T stage, if the check finds something that violates the policy, like an old, insecure algorithm, or one not ready for quantum threats when the policy requires it, OMZTA can trigger an action. It could force the use of a stronger algorithm, block the connection entirely, or start a process to update the crypto being used.
So it can adapt its crypto on the fly based on policy.
That's the idea. Managed, auditable adaptation within the framework, not a massive disruptive overhaul every time a new crypto standard emerges.
That is forward thinking.
Yeah.
Very clever. What about the open part of OMZTA? Is it actually open?
Well, the design philosophy is definitely about openness. They talk about using standardized interfaces so it can plug into other security tools easily. It's meant to be modular, so you could potentially swap out components or MICT cycles, and extensible, so organizations can adapt it or add their own capabilities.
Okay, sounds good in principle, but how does it actually stand up to attacks? That OMZTA unhackable document title is pretty provocative. What did that analysis find?
Yeah, it's a bold title. The author basically put on a hacker hat and tried to find easy ways in, straightforward attack paths.
Okay.
And the conclusion was, it's surprisingly hard. The layering, the constant checking it makes finding a simple vulnerability or a single point of failure really difficult.
Really? Why? What makes it so tough, according to that analysis?
A few things stood out. One, the verification is distributed across all those MICT cycles and layers. There isn't one single gatekeeper to trick. Two, the continuous checking means even if you get in momentarily, the next cycle might catch you.
No persistent foothold easily.
Right. Three, the contextual checks make it harder to spoof things. An attack needs to make sense within the broader context the system is seeing. Four, the layers mean you probably have to break through multiple defenses in sequence.
Defense in depth in action.
Right.
Exactly. And maybe most importantly, its ability to adapt and isolate. If a cycle seems compromised, the system might be able to just kill it and restart it cleanly, containing the damage. Plus, all that checking can act like a built-in speed bump, making certain kinds of attacks, like brute force, harder and easier to spot.
It does sound pretty resilient. But the title had a question mark. Did they find any potential weaknesses? Nothing's truly unhackable, right?
You're right. The author was clear. Perfect security is basically impossible. While easy paths weren't obvious, they pointed out potential difficult attack vectors, like finding a subtle bug in the code of one specific MICT cycle implementation.
Implementation flaws, always a risk.
Always. Or managing to compromise the core system OMZTA runs on, the operating system itself. Or successfully attacking the central policy engine that makes the high-level decisions.
Going after the control plane.
Yeah. Or maybe finding incredibly clever ways to feed the system bad context data to trick its decisions. Or just overwhelming the checking mechanisms with the sophisticated denial of service attack. But even these are harder because of OMZTA's adaptive nature. It might detect and react even to those.
Okay, so not absolutely bulletproof, but sounds like a much harder target.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears a bit, that proposed OMZTA License v2.0 document tells us about actually using this. What's the gist of the licensing?
It seems they're trying to balance being somewhat open with having a sustainable model. The actual OMZTA specification.
But using it.
Right. To actually implement OMZTA, run it operationally, or use it in a commercial product, you need a specific license agreement with the Board Brains Consortium.
And it looks like different terms for different users, a tiered system.
Exactly. They lay out several tiers. For nonprofits using it internally, it's often royalty-free, but they ask for knowledge return, basically. Share back what you learn.
Interesting.
Same for academic research, typically royalty-free for internal, non-commercial use, and they encourage knowledge return. For-profit companies using it internally, that needs an agreement, maybe fees involved, and likely knowledge return too.
And for selling OMZTA-based products.
Yeah, there are tiers for commercial products or external services using OMZTA. Those involve royalties, likely based on sales. Similar setup for consultants or vendors building solutions around OMZTA. And government use requires its own specific negotiation.
This knowledge return keeps popping up. What's the thinking there?
It seems like they want to create a feedback loop. If users share back non-secret insights, bug finds, performance data, feature ideas, it helps Board Brains improve OMZTA for everyone. It fosters a kind of collaborative improvement cycle.
Makes sense. Build a community around it. Now, the spec apparently had some diagrams. You mentioned the HCTS-ZT layered one.
Yeah, diagrams 8.1. It just visually lays out those 4 layers we talked about, L1 data plane at the bottom, up to L4 strategy and orchestration at the top. Shows how commands generally flow down, and status or data flows up. Helps picture the hierarchy.
And there was another diagram, an example flow.
Right, diagram 8.2. It walks through a simplified example, a user trying to access something protected by OMZTA.
What does it show happening?
It shows the user hitting, say, an API gateway, that's the policy enforcement point, or PE.
Yeah.
The PP talks to the L3 access policy cycle. L3 then needs context, so it queries L2 about the device's health, and the user's identity L2 might talk to the endpoint management tools and the identity provider for that.
Okay, layers talking to each other.
Yep. L2 sends the context back to L3. L3 might then check with the main policy engine for guidance, does its own checks, and makes the final allow-deny decision. Then it tells L1, maybe a firewall, and the original PP how to enforce it. And all along, logs are being sent to the SIEM system for monitoring.
So it shows all the pieces working together for one decision.
Exactly. Highlights how context flows up, decisions flow down, and different components collaborate through their MICT cycles.
That really helps visualize it. Okay, bringing it all together then. For you, the listener, trying to get your head around this, what are the absolute key takeaways from our deep dive into OMZTA?
Okay, number one, OMZTA is built on MICT, deeply rooted in zero trust. Number two, its engine is that continuous MICT cycle map, iterate, check, transform for constant verification and adaptation. 3, the layered HCTS-CT structure allows for that granular defense in-depth security. 4, crypto agility is a core design principle, aiming for future readiness, especially against quantum threats.
And 5.
And 5, the unhackable analysis suggests it's inherently pretty robust due to that distributed, continuous, contextual, layered, and adaptive design.
Yeah. And the real aha moment for me in all this is how that constant distributed checking seems to be the secret sauce. It feels like a fundamentally different way to think about security, moving away from static defenses to something always evaluating, always adapting, especially the crypto agility part for dealing with things like quantum.
Absolutely, and understanding this matters, whether you're involved in security planning, evaluating new tech, or just curious about where things are heading, it's relevant.
So if this is peak, you can look it up.
And for the practical side, the licensing details, the proposal suggests contacting BoardBrains Consortium directly.
Right. So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. Does a model like OMZTA, focused on constant adaptation, distributed trust, inherent resilience, does it represent a necessary shift? Is this how we have to start thinking about digital trust and security in the face of ever-increasing complexity and, maybe even a quantum future?
It's definitely something to chew on. A potential glimpse of the future of security architecture.